This video was made for the Diversity Day event, brought to us by the National Resources Conservation Service. In this video, we will cover a minnow barrier constructed by the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. The following interview, done by District Conservationist Madeline Cantu, will cover the development, construction, and implementation of the Minnow Barrier, along with its upkeep and a short demonstration of how the barrier is used.
All right, so I am Madeline Cantu. I'm the District Conservationist at the Sault Ste. Marie Field Office. Whoop, whoop. Doing Area 1 for Diversity Day, and today we are at the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians here in the Sioux, and we're at their Minnow Barrier, which we helped finance. So here's Rusty Akins.
Hi, as she said, my name is Rusty Akins. I'm the Fisheries Enhancement Coordinator for Sioux Tribe. One of my largest responsibilities is running the hatchery program for Sioux Tribe, and as she mentioned, we're out here at our walleye ponds today, going over the Minnow Barrier project that we did together. And this is Matt Howard. He's our hatchery assistant.
So I guess let's just get into the nitty-gritty on kind of a general overview on this and where the water's coming from. And
so behind you here we have it's approximately a 25-acre pond that we use for walleye rearing. This pond's been here since I think the late 70s. The Sioux Tribe purchased the property in '98. For the longest time, things went really well. Right around 2010, 2012, we started having a minnow problem. The minnows started inundating the pond, and they'll compete and be a predator problem for our walleyes. And so we generally stock this pond with about 1.5 million to 1.8 million walleye fry each spring. We like to see a million plus fingerlings come out of here in June. In 2014, we got less than 50,000 walleyes, but over 1 million minnows out of here, and so that was one of the problems. So we reached out to the NRCS about ways to solve that problem, and they had a cost share program in place that they did the engineering for this project, and we built this. I think it started in 2016 and we finished in 2018. So we've been running for 2019 to 2020. It's certainly helped our minnow infestations. We no longer, for a while there, we were having to use a rotenil, which is a fish poison, to take care of the minnows before we stocked it with the walleye fry. And while it's a fairly safe pesticide to use, we always hate to put chemicals in the water, right? And so with this structure here, we no longer have to do that, and so that's a good plus for us, and it's worked out pretty well. We really haven't had many minnows the last 2 years. It hasn't been a problem.
so, and one of the things that you had mentioned is, even when you do this, it's basically diverting the minnows away so they continue along their merry way that way, right?
Yep. So it being July now, we've already done our walleye season for the year, so the pond is drained. But how it works in general is in the spring when we fill the ponds, we can put these screens in. We've got this structure built here with 2 inlets there. Right now we have some stop logs in there, and we'll get to why we put those in here in a minute. But in the spring, we can install these screens. You see 2 sets here and a set over there. And so all the water that comes into the pond is screened, and so that keeps the minnows from coming in. And then once we get the pond filled up, then we go ahead and put the stop logs in, because our walleye fry could swim out through that. They're that small. So we put the stop logs in, and then that basically creates a barrier from the creek running through to our pond, so it keeps it so the minnows can't get in and the fry can't get out. And then with that in place, with the stop logs in place, the water moves on down. We also designed the bypass channel here, this water goes and it goes around our pond and then back into the original creek that it would have flown through if it the original creek it would have flowed into if the barrier wasn't in place. And so the connectivity of the creek has not changed.
Let's clarify what Rusty Akins is describing, with two fishy friends here. The tribe is supplementing the natural walleye population with young millimeter-sized walleye fry, the term for young walleye. However, the much larger adult minnow is eating up the young fry before they can mature. Not wishing to be solely reliant on aquacides to chemically control the population, the tribe developed a screen barrier to physically filter the fish based on their size. The millimeter-sized walleye fry were able to easily pass through gaps in the screen, while the minnows, much larger, often measuring several inches in size, were unable to pass through the barrier.
So where did this idea for this minnow barrier come from? Is there another tribe that uses this, or another fishery that might use it, or?
I think this was an original idea, right? It's something that's never been done before, and
Wow.
We did a small project upstream on our own, which kind of proof of concept as far as it working. So then that's like what Rusty said, we reached out to USDA to see if we could find a solution on a bigger scale.
And that's where like Amy Bastone came in, and I know that there was, the idea had been in the works for
Correct.
what, since 2014? No,
I
it was
think
before
14 was this project started, right?
Yeah.
that. So somewhere around there. So it took several, I think, revisions
Yeah.
and other things for the design. So I guess this is unique.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any in any other states, but at least where we are.
Yeah.
Our little home area.
Yeah, that's what Amy had said, you know, is they've always worked towards fish passage, not fish restrictions. And so it was kind of a new concept of how are we going to stop fish from getting through. They've always worked on fish passage
Right.
problems.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I think it was an original idea, an original design, and, you know,
It's really cool.
yeah.
I'm really excited to see it because I haven't seen kind of how it works, and I mean,
Actually
we've only
works.
talked about it,
Yeah.
so I'm looking forward to that. So
Like I said, you know, this would be, we pulled a few logs to relieve the pressure behind there, and once our walleye are out, but me and Matt can go ahead and pull some logs, we put some screens in, and that'll give you an idea of what it's like when it's filling in the spring. It'll kind of replicate that. So
Okay.
if you want to just take,
when do you stock and when do you harvest?
usually around, it was May 8th this year
When you stock.
when we stock. Usually it's the first 2 weeks of May.
Oh, so okay.
It can be as late as the third week of May. You know, it's kind of driven. You know, walleye spawn. They trigger to spawn when the water temp goes up. So when we start seeing water temps of 45, 46, we know it's time to catch our brood stock and start collecting eggs. And then once you get the eggs, they have to spend from 10 days to 3 weeks in the egg jars. And we can speed those up a little bit too if we want to, depending on weather. And then we try to get them in here as early as we can, you know, towards the 1st of May. They usually spend about 6 weeks in here, and they go from, I mean, they're small, right? There's 50, the way we measure them out to put them in here is 50,000 to every 250 milliliters. And so they're that small. If you think of a liter of pop would hold a million fry.
Wow.
And so they're that small when we put them in. And we pull them out usually around the 3rd week of June, 3rd to 4th week of June. And they're about 2 inches.
So they basically stay in here for a month.
6 weeks. 6 weeks, and they go from, you know, that small to 2 inches.
Nice.
And then that gives them, you know, a lot better chance of surviving out in the wild. We stock, the St. Mary's River is a high priority for us because, you know, it flows around a lot of tribal members in the Sioux area that like to fish the St. Mary's. And then we stock St. Martin's Bay, Sheboygan area, and the Eagle Fed area, and those are what we call our commercial interest. And so those are to develop and build fisheries for our commercial fishermen.
Okay.
And so that takes about, between the St. Mary's and those 3 commercial sites, about 1 million fish. And then after that, we start stocking inland lakes. We work with the Michigan DNR, and we develop a list of inland lakes that could use stocking in the ceded territory. And so, once we, on a good year, we'll do 1.5 million fish, and so we'll have a nice set of fish to be able to spread around to those inland lakes.
So you had mentioned before that one of the issues was that there was a decline, or you had mentioned a fish desert, right? Or
Oh, yeah.
is that the term?
Yeah, so that's the reason they kind of picked St. Martin's Bay. They had done some pre-stocking surveys up there, and there really wasn't a whole lot of fish community that you'd think you would see in that area, and so they thought it was, it'd be a good spot to try some walleye stocking, and it's turned out really well.
Because that was one of my other questions was, now that you're stocking, is it trending up, or it would naturally trend up, I mean, if you don't overfit, but that's not really an issue here.
So we stock these fish out in June, and then we go back in September and we do what's called electrofishing. With the electrofishing boat, you put electricity in the water and it stuns the fish, and we can catch them, and we take them back. All of our fish that we stock in our ponds are marked with an antibiotic called oxytetracycline. We call it OTC for short. And what that does is it marks their otolith, which is similar to the inner ear bone on a human, and it's the first calcified structure that develops in fish. And so we put them in a bath for 8 hours when they're 3 to 5 days old, and it'll mark that otolith. And we can fish a walleye up to, we've got them as old as 18, 21 years old. We can still find that mark on their otolith by looking at it. And so, in like St. Martin's, if you were to catch a walleye in St. Martin's, it's 90% chance it came from this hatchery. You catch one in the St. Mary's, it's right around 50% chance it came from this hatchery. And so we do these fall surveys, and we're able to track our success and what kind of contributions our hatcheries making to the fishery.
That's kind of your desk jockey part of the job?
Yeah.
Any of that data?
Yeah. It's fun to go and collect it, but then we got to look at the data. But it's interesting to know that these fish, you put them in, they are surviving, they are recruiting up into the fishery. Fishermen, we'll go take commercial samples also. So our assessment crew will go to the fish sheds of these commercial fishermen, and they'll pull that otolith, and we can keep them and look at them in the winter, and we can see how many of the fish they're catching came from the hatchery also. So it gives us a good idea of is what we're doing being productive, and is it worth doing, and it certainly has shown that way. Yeah.
All right, let's see how it works.
Like I said, this would, we would have these boards in here. These boards have been here since May, since we put the fry in, and that keeps them separate from the minnows. The beavers have kind of came along and gave us a hand at that separation, and so we'll see if we can get these logs out and then put some screens in and kind of give you an idea of what it looks like when it's filmed.
And we're working on a different.
Y'all are going to be doing this anyways. This is what you would, not just because we're here, you would be letting this out.
Yeah, on a normal year, once we're done, we'll pull all the stop logs and send the water on its way, and then the creek has its natural connectivity.
So basically, you put those, you take out the boards, you put in the screens.
Mm-hmm. So that's what it looked like when we're filling it in the spring. Those screens would be in there. We have both sets all the way up and down, and all the water that comes in the screen. So the spring, right, it's before spawning season, so all the minnows are going to be adults. They'll all be big enough not to come through that screen. And then it takes about, the spring runoff lasts probably about 2 weeks. And
Or depending on weather,
depending on weather, it can be faster, shorter.
It's going.
So this stream's been in there for about 5 minutes. You can see the number of minnows that are up there in that watershed that would be in our pond if we just had continuous flow all the way through. And so, like I said, these minnows would be, these are this year's minnows, so they would be competing with our walleye fry for food in the pond, and their parents would have been eating our walleye fry. So that would have been, double predation and competition. But you can see just from 5 minutes of how many minnows are actually in this water.
Is there a reason why the minnow population has increased?
Yeah, so that was the reason they, up there they did a lot of wetland restoration ponds, and so they
So how did that?
13 ponds up there.
So how did that create the minnows, though?
So that provides places for them to overwinter, and then every spring and fall they reproduce in the summer, and they once you have connectivity, the rain event or melt, these fish are moving all up and down the water system. Those are just big pools of
So it's like
it's
just yeah, okay.
Every spring they move, and that's just what they do naturally. And they'll move right down here, and we have a great pond with lots of food in it, and it makes a good home for them.
Nice.
There's really minnow broodstock stuff like that.
Yeah.
To summarize, as we take a little tour of the surrounding berm pond built up by the NRCS, the redevelopment of farmland and the construction of new ponds near the reserve has created the connectivity necessary for the minnows to enter the walleye's breeding areas. Thanks to the ingenuity of the local tribe and the support of the NRCS, the Minnow Barrier will allow the walleye population to continue to flourish, maintaining the local ecosystem and providing game for fishermen all throughout the area. This concludes our little field trip. We would like to thank Mr. Rusty Eikens and Matt Howard of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians for their time and effort, and to thank District Conservationist Madeline Cantu for her field work and interviewing. Thank you for watching.